Hello everyone, almost at 400 subs, Calamity here, and today I have a guide for Chongyun. This is a character that's definitely not as popular as it used to be. We'll go over why that is, but in this video I'm just going to cover everything you need to know about this guy, from his talents, weapon recommendations, artifact recommendations, constellations, team comps, and eventually some combat showcases. There should be timestamps down below if you just want to navigate to a specific part of the video. We have a lot to cover. I don't want to keep this video as short as I can make it, so let's just get started. Now, first things first, we have the normal attack talent, and I'm going to tell you straight off the bat, this is a really bad talent. If we look at the skill multipliers, very, very low, and there is nothing unique about his normal attacks. Are very standard for consecutive strikes. If you do a charge, he does the little spin, which is not going to do that good either. So it's really not advised at all to spend any sort of talent materials on upgrading this. Now, if you want a really quick comparison on like why we don't use Chongyun as a main DPS, and if you're wondering like, are they really low? Here, let's take a look. So we can see that his first hit, second hit, third, and fourth do 111, 99.8, 127, and 160 for the fourth hit, respectively, right? Now, yes, they are level 7, so these could be a bit higher with some more investment, but it's not going to be that much higher. Now, let's take a look at Razor's multipliers, who's another 4-star Claymore user. Already off the bat, 142 for his first hit, 122 for second hit, 153 for third, and 201%. That's over 40% more skill multiplier damage on his fourth hit than Chongyun, and they are exactly at the same level. They're both at level 7. You want another example? Let's take a look at Jinyan. Don't ask why she has level 8 talent, but we can see again, even her skill multipliers are even higher than Chongyun's. Granted, she is level 8, but still, it's a major difference, and that is why it is ill-advised to try to use Chongyun in any sort of main DPS build. Next up, we have the elemental skill. Let's actually take a look at it here. So Chongyun's going to strike the ground with his greatsword, causing a cryo explosion in a circular AoE in front of him that deals cryo damage. After a short delay, the cold air created by the explosion will create a frost field where all sword, claymore, and polearm wielding characters weapons will be infused with cryo. Now, this is actually a pretty unique elemental skill here because he has elemental damage conversion. Now, that conversion isn't really going to matter if you're not going for a certain team comp with him. If you are just doing one of his more popular team comps, which is the international team, you're just going to tap skill and then move on to your next character. The cryo infusion doesn't really matter for that team comp. But we can see the skill attributes real fast. It does have a 310% damage multiplier, which is actually pretty good. It does have a cooldown of 15 seconds and the field lasts for 10. Now, keep in mind, you still will be getting that infusion as long as you're on the field. If the duration for the infusion is when you step off. And now we get to Chongyun's best ability, which is his burst. So he'll perform the secret hand seals and he'll summon 3 giant spirit blades in midair that fall to the earth one by one after a short delay, exploding as they hit the ground. When the spirit blades explode, they deal AoE cryo damage and launch opponents. Whenever you see launch opponents, just keep in mind that this only means small enemies like hilichurls, slimes, that kind of thing. They're not going to launch like gigantic hilichurls or the ruin enemies, stuff like that. So let's take a look at the skill attributes. Now, you might notice that the skill damage is kind of low considering that this is level 11. But I'd also like to remind you that this skill hits multiple times. So this thing summons 3 blades that deal 271% skill damage multiplier each. Now, he'll actually summon a 4th blade if you have a C6. We'll talk more about that later. Something that's also really good about this burst is that it only has a 40 energy cost. How rare is that? These days, every new 5-star, and even the 4-star characters these days are getting 70, 80 energy costs for their burst, needing tons of energy recharge. Because of this low cost to his burst, we can build Chongyun in a way that, we don't have to build so much energy recharge, therefore we can focus more on getting damage for him. Something about this burst that many people might not know or you might have forgotten is that these hits actually count as claymore hits. So his burst counting as claymore hits means that he actually is a little bit better, a little bit more efficient at destroying shields than other characters, or at least other non-claymore characters. So if you're going up against a hydro shield or an electro shield where cryo has an easier time destroying them, then Chongyun is actually a decent option for that sort of thing if you're struggling against a certain enemy type. Let's talk about his passive talent. So the first one is called Steady Breathing, and this is going to make anybody that's in your elemental skill that is a melee character have an 8% attack speed increase. This is actually pretty nice. You know, a little bit of attack speed is a hard buff to find. Well, you know, at least before Mika showed up. It was a hard buff to find, especially earlier on, so this was actually a nice passive talent here. It's not going to do much, though, for his international team, since no one's really doing normal attacks on that sort of team. But next up, we have the Rhyme Chaser Blade. This one's actually also a good passive talent skill. So when you summon your elemental, or when you do your elemental skill, and its duration expires, a Spirit Blade is going to be summoned, and it's going to strike nearby opponents, dealing 100% of the skill of your elemental skills damage as AoE cryo damage. In addition to that, your AoE or the cryo res is going to be decreased by 10%. Your opponent's cryo res is going to be decreased by 10% for 8 seconds, assuming they get hit by the blade, of course. So you do your skill, it finishes, and then the blade is going to strike down and reduce your opponent's cryo res. Actually, really nice debuff for your enemies there. And his final talent is just an expedition-related one. He'll make the time a bit shorter when going on any expedition in Leeway. So that's pretty much a quick summary of his talents. It's a very simple kit. Chongyun is an off-field... Well, not really an off-field DPS. He's more of a quick swap burst support character, is what I should say. So when you swap to him, you're just going to quickly use his elemental skill, you know, depending on what team comp, to set up the cryo infusion if needed. If not, then you just use his elemental skill and then his burst, and then you swap to your next character, and that's pretty much his entire shtick. Next up, we have some weapon recommendations I have here, and well, the Luxurious Sea Lord is an okay weapon. This is an event limited time weapon, so I'm not going to recommend that. The best actual recommended weapon for Chongyun that I can tell you right now is going to be the Sacrificial Greatsword. What this does is allow you to use his elemental skill twice, or at least an 80% chance to. And this is good for several reasons. This Sacrificial Sword also gives you a substat of energy recharge, which is honestly, again, he has a really small, I was going to say short, energy cost for his burst. So this 30% and the fact that you can do your elemental skill twice, that should honestly be enough to burst off cooldown consistently, just with this weapon alone. Pair this with something like the two-piece effect from the Emblem of Severed Fate, and your Chongyun already has 150% energy recharge for free. So you can feel free to go ham on damage when you're building your artifacts and looking at substats for your Chongyun. This is also going to be good for teams that want the cryo infusion, because you can just slam down, do his elemental skill once, swap to the person that you want the infusion to go on, swap back to Chongyun, do another elemental skill, and basically you have a very long period of time where you have cryo infusion for the character that you want to do cryo, you know, normal attacks. Now, let's just say you don't have a Sacrificial Greatsword, or you're like, do I have any other options? I kind of don't like it. Well, I can also recommend a Favonius Greatsword. This is also going to make him sort of a utility, a battery for his team by providing those extra elemental particles if you want to go this route. If you're looking for something more damage-oriented, well, then you can go with the Lithic Blade. He's going to himself get a stack for the weapon effect here because he is from Leeway, excuse me. And if you do use him in the international team, well, that's Zhanling, Jing Cho, those two more characters from Leeway, and that's going to be 3 stacks instantly already. So it's very easy to get good value out of that weapon if you're using him in an international team. Even if you're using him with the Shenhe Cryo Infusion team, then you have him and Shenhe, and, well, depending on who you're using, you know, you can also easily get 3 or 4 stacks for the Lithic Blade as well. So this is a good offensive weapon, gives him a lot of attack percentage, gives him crit rate. I try not to recommend this weapon too much, but if you did get a Serpent Spine off the Battle Pass, this could be something you could use on him. It covers his crit rate needs, well, a huge chunk of it, and he'll get a little bit more of a damage boost from the weapon effect. I also try not to recommend event weapons. Like I mentioned, I have him with the Luxurious Sea Lord. If you do have the Mailed Flower, this was an event in the last update that we had. The Mailed Flower could be a decent option when using him in the international team. If you don't know what that is, just hang around for the team comp section and we'll discuss the 2 popular team comps to use Chongyun in. 5-star options, well, take your pick. If you do have a Skyward Blade, that's going to be pretty good on him. A Wolf's Gravestone, which I don't have, is also going to be another good option. It also gives him more utility again by giving his team another buff from the weapon's effect, which is actually really nice. You know, 5-star weapons are hard to recommend for newer players. So definitely my recommendation, Sacrificial Greatsword. All right, let's talk artifacts. Now, there's quite a few options that you can do for Chongyun. You can do something with, like I'm doing here, where I have a little bit of 2-piece combinations here. I gave him the 2-piece Noblesse Oblige and the 2-piece Blizzard Strayer. The Noblesse Oblige gives him 20% increased elemental burst damage, which is perfect because that's all that really matters when it comes to his damage. And then the cryo damage bonus, also really a nice boost there. Now let's say you don't want to mix and match 2-piece artifact set pieces. What can I go for? You can go for a Noblesse Oblige because, again, Chongyun has a really small energy cost for his burst. Again, it's only 40, so you don't need that much energy recharge on him, meaning that he can use his burst quite often. So you'll be able to keep this buff from the Noblesse Oblige, the 4-piece effect, up pretty much all the time, honestly. And if you're not familiar, the Noblesse Oblige gives a 20% attack boost to your entire party for 12 seconds. Another option I can recommend is going to be the Emblem of Severed Fate. This is also a really good artifact set for him because, again, it gives him a little bit of energy recharge, which is what he needs, and it increases your burst damage, which is perfect. That's where the majority of Chongyun's damage comes from, is his burst. So an artifact set that buffs that is going to be perfect. The only downside, though, is that Chongyun doesn't need to build that much energy recharge, so you won't be getting the most value from the 4-piece effect, but overall, this is still going to be a pretty good set for him regardless. And finally, another set that I can recommend is going to be the Gilded Dreams set. This is the one in Sumeru. This is going to give him an Elemental Mastery increase by 80 on the 2-piece, and then the 4-piece set, basically depending on what team you're running him in, he's going to get either an Elemental Mastery boost or an attack percentage boost, which is fine because even in the international team, where his damage has a chance to actually melt, which does a ton of extra damage, this set is perfect. It's going to just basically amplify the melt damage, basically. So Gilded Dreams is an okay set that I can recommend, but if you're not sure what to go for, I always recommend just go Emblem of Severed Fate. It's just good. Now let's talk about the artifacts themselves. Let's say you decided on an artifact set. Now what am I looking for on those substats? Pretty easy. You're looking for crit rate, crit damage as needed. Always try to balance the 2 out so that you can crit consistently for the most part. Energy recharge, again, just a tiny bit. Since I'm not using the Sacrificial Greatsword and I don't have Emblem of Severed Fate, I needed a tiny bit more energy recharge on my substats, as you can see on this one. But if you are using a Sacrificial Greatsword and an Emblem of Severed Fate set, you do not need energy recharge on your Chongyun at all. Like, a tiny bit of it on your substats is okay, but I mean, you do not need to invest at all in energy recharge, and you can go full damage at that point. If you are using him in the international team, again, where he can melt, Elemental Mastery is going to be good. Otherwise, just get him some attack percentage, and that is pretty much it. Again, for the Sands, either energy recharge or attack percentage, but most likely you're just going to go attack percentage or Elemental Mastery. Again, depends on your team, but attack percentage is usually the safe go-to main stat. For the Goblet, of course, we want cryo damage. That is what Chongyun does best at. And then for your circlet, we either want crit rate or crit damage, depending on which one you have less of. And that should cover basically your artifact needs. So Chongyun is a character that actually does get pretty stronger with each constellation he gets, but some of them are kind of you know, on the meh side, but let's go over them. So the first one's going to be Ice Unleashed, and this is going to make the last attack of Chongyun's normal attack combo release like 3 ice, like tiny little ice blades that deal 50% of Chongyun's attack as cryo damage to all opponents in its path. Now, this is probably his worst constellation, I'll be honest with you, because again, we do not use Chongyun's normal attack, and it requires you to do the full combo, which is a huge waste of time, as we saw how low those multipliers were. And even when you do it, it does only half of his attack as cryo damage. It's not that great, and it's not something you should be using at all. This is where we start getting to the good stuff. C2 is Atmospheric Revolution. When you use any elemental skills or burst within Chongyun's field that he creates with this elemental skill, you're actually going to reduce the cooldown of the elemental skill or burst used by 15%. This is actually really, really good no matter what team you're putting Chongyun on. International team's going to be able to rotate more quickly. Shenhe's going to get her elemental skill back a little bit faster. This is great. This is a really good constellation right here. And I think this is a underrated one as well that a lot of people forget, that Chongyun can reduce the cooldown of your team's skills and bursts. This is really, really good. C3 and C5, of course, are going to increase skill and burst levels. This is absolutely great. Means more damage for your Chongyun. Now, C4 is going to regenerate 1 energy every time you hit an opponent affected by cryo. This effect can occur only once every 2 seconds. Unfortunately, that 1 energy is a bit low. If it was something like 3 energy, that would be pretty good. But thankfully, Chongyun, again, I've said this a lot, has a really low burst cost. So this is actually a decent constellation for him. And you are going to be hitting enemies affected by cryo, or at least you should, all the time. Now keep in mind, it just says hit. So this does apply when you use your elemental skill and your burst. So you don't have to use a normal attack to proc this effect. And finally, we have the C6, which is going to be the Rally of the Four Blades. Really strong constellation here. So you're going to deal 15% more damage to opponents with a lower percentage of their max HP remaining than Chongyun. That one's kind of like a iffy, weird kind of requirement. So basically, it's a nice finisher. When an enemy's HP gets really low, you can use your burst that will deal even more damage on an enemy to quickly finish it off. But here's the kicker, it has another effect, and it's actually going to summon an additional Spirit Blade. That is huge. Remember that it had a skill multiplier of 271, but you hit 3 times. Now with C6, you hit 4 times. So that's actually a crazy huge damage increase for Chongyun here. Alright, let's talk team comps. Try to ignore what it says on the bottom left, okay? I'm out of team slots, don't judge me. For all the veterans that are watching this guide for some reason, I'm sure this is going to look a little nostalgic to you, but right before you is what used to be the original, well, it is still the original international team. And this team was the strongest, especially for free-to-play players, teams in the game early on. In fact, it still is. It's just a little bit different these days, thanks to a certain character that got added. So you have 4 characters here that are all quick swap burst supports. Zhonling and Jingcho are off-field DPS, whereas Chongyun is just a burst support and then you switch off. Bennett is also here as a healer and a damage amplifier. So basically this team builds up their bursts and you're quickly swapping to each one, casting their burst and skill, swap to the other one, cast their burst then skill, or skill then burst, you know, whichever, and then you swap to the next character, rinse and repeat. And now you got Zhonling's Pyronado going everywhere, you got Jingcho's blades hitting enemies, and now you got Chongyun's Spirit Blades also hitting enemies. You got so many elemental reactions going on. Things are getting vaporized, things are melting, things are getting frozen, things are getting shattered. Basically, you have so much numbers and damage on the field and infinite energy, basically, that you can just keep bursting over and over again. And this team was, and it is still, a very strong team. There's just a stronger version of it these days, like I said. Now, if you're wondering why this team, or at least the one with this version of this team fell off, I think you kind of figured it out with the bottom left name there. Around when Inazuma came out, and Raiden Shogun was introduced, well, we got a better replacement for Chongyun. And that would be Raiden Shogun, who provides so much energy for her team that you didn't need as much energy recharge as you did before because, you know, again, Raiden Shogun is just the best battery in the game, no matter what element her teammates are. And because of this, you're able to build these three, Zhang Bennett, and Jing Cho, for more damage and a little less so for energy recharge, thanks to Raiden Shogun. And that is the new version of this team that is definitely used way more often and continues to dominate the popularity charts in Spiral Abyss. So poor Chongyun, you know, it became a victim of power creep once Raiden Shogun arrived on the scene. Alright, let's say you don't want to run the international team of Chongyun. Fair enough. You can still run something like this, which is a freeze team for Chongyun. This is definitely going to be Chongyun's more niche team, and the reason for that is because Shenhe is such a rare character, so to speak. She only just had her first rerun after almost a year. Actually, I think it was exactly like a year since her release. So not a lot of players have her. She does basically amplify cryo damage while reducing your opponent's resistance to it. I have Barbara here because I don't have Kokomi. Kokomi would obviously be the superior option. And Kazuha is here just for, you know, grouping up enemies so that they can be in Chongyun's field. And for the Swirl and Viridescent Veneer debuff, of course. Now, another way to build Chongyun in a comp like this is to convert someone into a cryo DPS. Now, unfortunately, I can't really showcase this, which is a bit unfortunate, but I have seen people use characters like Zhongli. So we would replace Barbara with Zhongli. So the way it would work is, again, we have Kaza here for the damage amplification and the swirl. We have Shenhe here to buff cryo damage and to reduce cryo resistance on enemies. Chongyun is the key piece here that converts basically anyone of your choosing to become a cryo DPS. So we could turn Zhongli into a cryo DPS, but I don't have the artifacts and I don't have a weapon. How does conversion work if two characters have two different conversions? Now, I can't actually show this because Bennett needs his C6 to do this. I honestly just don't have a C6 Bennett. He's never been in any of my polls ever since I got him to C5. It's just how it is, I swear. But when you get C6 Bennett, he converts normal attacks to Pyro. And then if I do Chongyun's skill, that converts also to Cryo. So you might be wondering, how does that work if a character is standing in both fields? Well, it works in priority of elements. And the way that works is that Pyro is always going to be the main priority. I don't know why this is, but it's just how the game's coded. So if you had Bennett's field here and then you did Chongyun's field here, it would be pyro damage that would take over. In case anyone's wondering how that works when you have multiple cases of elemental conversion. Alright, round 2, but we're doing the freeze team, so we're actually going to start off with Shenhe. Now normally I would have done the burst there, but we didn't have it up, so we want to do our skill instead, and that's okay. We didn't even get the full damage there, but you know, you can see that it's doing pretty good damage already. Now we can do the burst. Big numbers right there, just so many on top of each other. It's great. Use Kaza again, then we do the Shenhe setup. We can get Barbara to freeze our enemies again, and then use Shenhe's skill. Big 22k hit there twice. Let's use Kazuha's burst here. And you can see we're just constantly freezing everything. So do the burst again. Shenhe's able to just burst basically all the time because of Chongyun just being a great battery with the sacrificial greatsword, generating lots of particles for his team. Alright, we're gonna use Shenhe again. Kazuha. Gotta use that. Oh, did we already use that skill? And then we do this. Big damage. Rinse, repeat. Oh, I totally whiffed that hit. That's okay though. I'll just finish off with normal hits there. Oops. Gotta get Barbara's, whoops. Gotta get the Kaza out. Maybe not the best rotation there, but you know, we'll take it. We'll take it. We're not trying to 3-star the Abyss here. Even without Shenhe's buff there, they were doing 15k damage each blade, which is pretty good. Alright, so there's the freeze version with Chongyun, and you can see they both work pretty well, right? I don't know what the times were. I think maybe this team was a bit faster just because, you know, Kazuha grouping up enemies saves so much time. But regardless, I still think both of them did solid, and I wasn't even playing optimally. So as you can see, Chongyun does actual good damage. Like, his numbers are fine. It's just power creep. While his numbers are fine, you know, there's just so many better characters that keep adding into the game. And since he's cryo, another thing with that element is that it just has nothing to do with Dendro. So, you know, Dendro's the hot new element that everyone likes to play with the hyper blooms and the aggravates. So I understand that, and you know, cryo is it's just been the same since forever. But I still think our little exorcist here is definitely still a good character, still a solid character, definitely more underrated these days. But hopefully this guide was helpful in any sort of way to someone out there that was looking how to build Chongyun, especially, you know, this late into Genshin's lifespan. He's, like I said, he's still good. I don't think he's a complete waste of resources. I mean, but with that being said, that's going to be a wrap on this video. If there is anything you felt like I missed when talking about this character's kit, please let me know in the comments down below. I'll do my best to try and answer you. Again, I'm really close to 400 subscribers. If you enjoyed this video, or again, if it was at least a little bit helpful, consider subscribing and leaving a like. Helps me a lot. But yeah, that's going to be a wrap here. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.